Others in support?
Nina Weiler Harwell on behalf of AARP California's over 3 million members in support.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, Silvio Ferrari with the California Building Industry Association in support.
Thank you.
Good morning. Megan Rose with Leading Age California, representing nonprofit providers of affordable senior housing in support.
Thank you so much.
Rebecca Gonzalez, National Association of Social Workers, California chapter in support.
Thank you.
Daniel Savino, Association of Regional Center Agencies, also in support.
Thanks, sir.
Roxanne Miller, representing the mayor of San Jose and the city council, in very strong support. We want to get going doing that housing again. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good morning. Kim Lewis, representing AspiraNet, one of the largest foster family agencies in the state, as well as the California Coalition for Youth, which represents runaway and homeless youth throughout the state. This is a great bill to have more opportunity for our most vulnerable population to get housed afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members, David Jones on behalf of the cities of Sacramento, Glendale, Burbank, and Santa Rosa in support.
Thank you.
John Lovell on behalf of the California Police Chiefs Association, California Association of Code Enforcement Officers, California College and University Police Chiefs. Nexus between public safety and housing is clear. This is a good bill.
Thank you, Mr. Lovell.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Paul Gonzalez, representing the cities of Alameda, Banning, Camarillo, Concord, Fairfield, Lakewood, Thousand Oaks, and Torrance. I'd like to thank the author. Support the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez.
Good morning. Steve Wallach on behalf of the Alameda County Board of Supervisors in support.
Thanks, Steve.
Michael Radigan on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, Santa Clara County, in support.
Thank you so much.
Good morning. Moira Top on behalf of the City of San Diego in support.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members, Andrew Antwi here today on behalf of Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti in support.
Thank you.
Michael Young on behalf of the California Labor Federation, also here in support.
Thank you, sir.
Sylvia Solis Shaw on behalf of the City of Santa Monica in support.
Thank you.
Karen Lang on behalf of Mayor Edwin Lee in the City and County of San Francisco in support.
Thank you.
Laura Parr on behalf of the City of Napa in support.
Thank you.
Lisa Hershey, Housing California, strongly support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Karen Liggett, and this is my second hat, Homeless Consortium. I'm a executive board member for Yuba Sutter Homeless Consortium, the High Senator bill, and we are in strong support of this bill, all bills to help homeless.
Thank you so much.
Tiffany White on behalf of Bridge Housing and the Infill Builders Federation.
Thank you.
Frank Mecca, Executive Director of the County Welfare Directors Association in support.
Thank you, Mr. Mecca.
Sean Topakian on behalf of the California Apartment Association in support.
Thank you. Opposition to the measure. Further questions by our CPA?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have two thoughts, maybe, Mr. Chair, not questions, but...
Eddie, how many subparts? No, it's good. They're always good. Please, go ahead.
This is a $300 million tax credit if it's utilized. That's a big number where we've just set up 2 special sessions to look at an MCO tax and transportation taxes. So I'm kind of trying to figure out the disconnect where on one side we're screaming poor boy, and on the other side we're saying let's make some more credits. And I'm also observing that the state has just sort of had a real no-growth mentality. If we were really looking at building and providing housing, we would have had better water retention and replenishment programs to deal with all this. I'm just enamored by the disconnects. And that's all I've got to say about that, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
That was only one thing.
I would then say, what does the Department of Finance...
I was okay. I wasn't inviting another one.
Oh, thanks for the cue. What is the Department of Finance or the LAO doing to model? Do we have a software program that says if we add this in and we anticipate the following types of activity, what does that do to our budgets? And
well, that's what I was trying to get to.
Already alluded to that.
We're going to do that. I think Senator Hernandez is right. But what I was alluding to was the economic feedback effect. The idea is if you spend money, but you spend money on something that's making money, that's always the question, right? It was the question we grapple with in business and government. Right. It's not static. And so what I was suggesting is that, because there's such a leverage here with the federal money and the federal tax credits and the like that was displayed when I met with the author, I asked him to put this together to try to help demonstrate that point, because it really goes to the question that we're always asked here to say, well, Exactly. Let's spend more money, because the tax credit's nothing more than spending money. We have $34 billion of tax deductions that I want to examine in a committee as we go through each one of them and ask the hard questions, because we're saying we need more revenue. We have all these deductions over here. At the end of the day, we've got political reasons for them, or social or public policy reasons, but we want to balance it, right? We need to ask those questions. That's fair. The thing that differentiates this, I think that differentiated Leader Olson's measure is that when you analyze the economic feedback effect, I did a lot of housing stuff when I was here before, you know, they put a lot of people to work, you pay a lot of sales tax, a lot of payroll tax, a lot of income tax, and when you analyze that, given the leveraged up numbers here, I did a lot of tax deals in the old days as a young lawyer, it actually is a profit to the state. It really isn't taking money out of the hands of the state. And I think that's what it's going to show. That's what that diagnostic that I've asked them to do shows. We've already seen this $90 million add-on to local government, which is a gimme, that it'll help pay for that last bill that we just passed for Orange County to cost $2.26 million. There's their money to pay for the county. But I think you're going to see that.
No offense taken.
Okay. Thank you. Did I ask for opposition?
After Orange County.
Did I ask for opposition? No. Any opposition to this measure? Oh, sorry, we had questions. Senator Hernandez and Senator Bell, real quickly.
So again, just following up on my early comment, and obviously I'm a supportive, very, very, very worthy cause. Should this not be part of a bigger conversation? And I don't know if it's addressed in this bill, and keep in mind that, you know, you're drawing down federal dollars, you're making more bang for your buck. Concerns I have, though, is it enough? Number one, but more importantly, with acquisition of land is very, very expensive. Is there going to be enough credits to actually bring it down for affordable? And what is really, really, for me to make an impact, they've got to be affordable for, you know, those below whatever that certain percentage of poverty level is. How do we get that? But I think here's the other question that I'd like to ask, and maybe this is part of the bigger discussion, is do we have measured outcomes? And I don't know if the bill addresses that, but, you know, do we see that over a period of time? Are you getting your bang for your buck? And maybe that's part of the discussion you have in a bigger context. Maybe we should start looking at, if we're going to do this, say within a 10-year period, what is the return on your investment? Just posing that as a thought, and I'm not making any suggestions for amendments or not, but just some kind of overall concerns that I have. But obviously, I'm still supportive.
Great. And Senator, first of all, thank you for your support, and you ask important questions. To your first question about, is this going to have the impact that we hope it to have? We know that when redevelopment was eliminated and when so-called Prop 1C funds from 2006, the old housing bond infrastructures went away, we lost about $2 billion a year of funding in the last few years. And coincidentally or not, that has coincided with our state's affordable housing crisis. And the package that we have put together really tries to get back at least to that level. And we will see what the impact of that will be, but that's part of the rationale for how we, for the amount that we did.
How much would it supplement, and how close will we get to that? And I'll just very quickly, because even though we have redevelopment that was supposedly going to go to affordable housing, not all cities did that. That was my biggest concern. An example, the City of Industry didn't use any money. They gave it to the County of LA because they didn't want to build any more houses because they didn't want any more voters. So none of their money went from redevelopment, went to affordable housing. They gave it to County of our City of LA.
And certainly, you know, in our city, we used the largest chunk of that money for housing development, and we can have a conversation about redevelopment, but all estimated redevelopment plus loss of infrastructure, the estimate's probably close to $2 billion. The housing package that Speaker Atkins has laid out, about half of that is what we are talking about here with AB 35. The other half is AB 1335, which I know is still going through the process as well, which would hopefully establish a permanent source of funding for affordable housing money. So those two combined would get us close to where we were with all the multiplier effects that we're talking about. I think one other thing I'll mention, our this tax credit is supported by our state treasurer as well as our state controller, our two state officials whose fiduciary duty is similar to what Senator Morlock's duties were when you were CPA, of ensuring that state finances were being appropriately leveraged. And I certainly know within the treasurer's office that has had the responsibility of overseeing the tax credit program for the last 30 years, every year they have looked at metrics. They have looked to make sure that every project that they invest in is going to get the bang for the buck that we hope it to get. And Treasurer Chung has been very involved in these conversations around Senator Bell's tax credit proposal, around ours, to ensure that that this is the case. But at the end of the day, we want to ensure that a dollar that we spend from a tax credit is going to leverage, in this case, literally $300 million. We think will leverage about a total of $2 billion worth of private and government dollars. In addition to, and that doesn't even address what the chairman has laid out as far as other multiplier effects that we didn't build into the model at this moment.
And that's good to hear what you're saying with regard to the treasurer and the controller, but should we address that in the legislation? I'm not saying for you to amend it, so that the people of the state of California will see that we're doing our fiduciary responsibility, not just totally depending on the treasurer or the controller, but maybe that should be part of the discussion, is the outcomes and, you know, the return we're getting on our investment.
The treasurer has a committee, the tax allocation committee, that oversees this and reviews every year what projects are getting money in the pipeline. And I believe that they do put out reports that lay that out. But again, certainly happy to explore additional information.
Just make sure that it gets built. I think what Senator Hernandez is asking, and maybe we can address this in Senator Bell's committee as this moves forward, because I think that's a really important point in all these measures, is some type of stand. I mean, look, I think you're going to pass the test with flying colors, and I think, in fact, the data will show, that will prove your point in a big way. But maybe, Senator Bell, asking some additional indicators that we have a look back and say, okay, now this is built, what has it done? How many jobs did it create? How much economic feedback was there? And that we, as a legislative branch of government in both houses, step up to the plate and evidence that accountability as a government, as a philosophy of how we spend money and the taxpayers' precious dollars. I think it's a really good point.
And precisely, and if it's successful, it's reason to continue doing
it. And to go bigger.
And if it's
doesn't
not,
matter, puts more people to work.
What do you do to fix that? So
that's right. That's right.
And those are all great points. Happy to explore that conversation. I would also say to the chairman of Senate Health, there are many multiplier effects that we know taking homeless folks off the streets and putting them into supportive housing or other affordable housing will have enormous impacts on our healthcare system, on our public service system, and our education system. We have some estimates of what that looks like, but we'd like to keep modeling that, again, to show the multiplier effect.
Well, maybe we can use some of the money to increase provider rates, too. What do you think?
Which, by the way, as a supporter of your Medi-Cal reimbursement rate, I would be happy to support as well.
And I just wanted to mention that.
And we'll tie it to SB 8.
Yes. But to all of these comments, an affordable housing cost study was done in recent years to do exactly this, to look at what is the return we're getting, and they laid out more than 10 economic and social benefits that had both financial and policy.
Can you share those reports with the committee? I'd love to see them.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any further questions from the members? I did ask for opposition. I saw the support. No opposition. Bill's been moved by Senator Hernandez. And anything further, Mr. Chairman?
I just respectfully ask for your aye vote. Thank you for your consideration of this, and obviously open to continue conversations of how we ensure a rate of return that will make even the private sector proud.
The motion is a due pass to trans and housing. Senator Bell, to your committee. Secretary, call the roll.
Hertzberg?
Aye.
Hertzberg, aye. Wynn? Bell? Bell, aye. Hernandez? Hernandez, aye. Lara? Morlock? Pavley? 3-0.
3-0, we'll hold that. Thank you very much. Great presentation.
Thank you, Senator.
How do you like this from SB? I like this. This is in order. My sense of order here. We went from AB 35 to AB 36. Assemblymember Campos. File item number 4. Thank you. Great, thank you. I'm going to call him. Madam Speaker pro tempore for life.
Thank you. Mr. Chair and Senator and members of the committee, I present to you AB 36, a bill that seeks to improve transparency and the relationships between our communities and law enforcement. After consulting with the Governor's Office of Emergency Services, I was able to take some amendments that will allow the law enforcement to get free, non-harmful equipment in an effective manner. I will address that later on in my comments. Due to the recent conflict between communities and police over the nation, distrust of law enforcement has increased to at an all-time high. In many of these conflicts, law enforcement agencies across the country have made use of their military equipment, such as armored vehicles, against their citizens. It is becoming clear that law enforcement agencies are becoming more militarized as time passes. Last year, the city of San Jose acquired a 10-ton armored vehicle from the military surplus program. After receiving this military tank, the city received backlash from communities, predominantly communities of color, concerned about what this equipment was going to be used for and why it was in their neighborhoods. They later returned that equipment after taking into account that it was not something that was necessary, that their community policing model was much more effective. And to name many more examples, the case in Ferguson, where law enforcement deployed armored military vehicles to respond to civil unrest over the police killing of a teenager, Michael Brown. These are just two cases, and so I decided that we needed to address this. AB 36 would establish a public process that would allow for communities to get involved before dangerous free military surplus equipment can be obtained through the federal 1033 program. Specifically, AB 36 requires that before a local law enforcement agency can apply for surplus military equipment, its elected body must hold a public hearing regarding the necessary equipment that will be coming into the community, vote on an ordinance during the public hearing that would specifically and specify which items would be able to go into these communities. This ordinance will last 1 year at most. If they decided that they wanted to review the surplus list earlier, they can. The reason why we took this amendment is because the cities wanted to make sure that they didn't have to come to a council meeting and have a public hearing on every piece of equipment that would come into the city. So they will have an assessment of what the list will look like. The community will have the opportunity to give input on it, and then they will not have to go before the governing body every time the department, the police department or the sheriff's department accepts a surplus piece of equipment. These are some of the amendments that we have taken, and I have a witness here with me. My other witness had a family emergency, so she will not be here. But I think that the bill is self-explanatory, and I think this is good policy, not only for the state of California, but I think as we lead the nation. Thank you.
Sir.
Greetings, Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to testify today. My name is Edwin Perez. I am the legislative advocate for the California NAACP. And on behalf of the 62 branches and youth units throughout the state of California, we are in full support of AB 36. 400 assault rifles, grenade launchers, night vision goggles, helicopters, a 3-year-old armored vehicle built to withstand blasts in a war zone. These are just a portion of the 1,100 devices that were purchased and rolled out in Brevard County, Florida. With the history of police and community relations in low-income and black and brown neighborhoods, the surplus military equipment acquired by these law enforcement agencies only exacerbate the relation and trust issues between the two. outfitting law enforcement in the community in military equipment and even military-style uniforms sends the wrong message to the people in the community and gives the impression that the cities are actually occupied as opposed to protected. Makes the people feel like they're in a war zone. Just recently, President Obama spoke about the militarization of the police in wake of what happened in Ferguson, and the police being heavily militarized. Our president has developed new rules on training and transparency as it relates to local agencies acquiring military equipment. In March, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie signed into law a bill that passed unanimously both houses that made his state the first to require local approval before any local law enforcement agency can accept military equipment from the U.S. government. It's what the citizens of New Jersey wanted. There is an increasing pushback from the people in the community when they learn about law enforcement and their military equipment. If local law enforcement agencies purchase military equipment and supplies partly with taxpayer money, it should be important and vital to not only that the public knows, but they at least have some input. AB 36 is great public policy in that it requires local agencies to provide the public with more transparency and involves the community in making decisions so that law enforcement as well as the citizens can share the same vision of how they want the community to be policed. This makes a good step in the right direction in building the trust between the law enforcement and the members of the community. And for these reasons, we urge your aye vote. Thank you.
Others in support? Opposition? Sitting and hearing none? I'm joking.
Mr. Chair and members, Tim Cromartie on behalf of the League of California Cities. While we appreciate the spirit with which the author brought this measure forward and appreciate the need for additional transparency in regard to acquisition of this equipment, we think that a blanket application of the Brown Act in all cases may actually compromise public safety. I have to faithfully represent our organization. This bill was vetted by our Public Safety Committee, which consists overwhelmingly of law enforcement professionals. Their concern is that a blanket application of the Brown Act to all forms of equipment purchased under the 1033 program might give those who would do harm in our communities a meaningful tactical advantage. For example, if there's a decision about the acquisition of armor-piercing ammunition, the bank robbers next time may show up with Kevlar vests. So there's what we're interested in doing of the author, and it depends on the will of the author on this, and I've posed this with her staff, is to explore jointly in talks with the Office of Emergency Services as well as the author a way to possibly have closed session meetings with some form of oversight, civilian oversight on the part of local governing bodies that could give an additional layer of vetting of these things with the governing body of local jurisdictions, but not under circumstances in all instances that are compliant with the Brown Act. We're interested in having discussions about what the criteria could be for those closed session decisions. But in the interim, we are opposed to the measure.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. Corey Salzillo here on behalf of the California State Sheriff's Association, regretfully in opposition. We'd first like to thank the author for taking the recent amendments that don't subject routine equipment like tents and first aid kits and things like that to the provisions of the bill. Unfortunately, we remain opposed because this will severely impair our ability to acquire otherwise useful equipment. And in the case of sheriffs specifically, we're talking about elected constitutional officers. We're concerned about the precedent that's going through the legislature right now of subjecting operational and tactical decisions to a board approval outside of the normal appropriations process, while the board retains the ability to budget and to spend and control decisions that way.
Yeah, but isn't this stuff given for free? How does this come through the appropriations process?
My point is that it does come for free, or it does come discounted, but the issue is that these are elected.
You get a tank for free that doesn't come through the appropriations process. How does the public know about that?
We can't get tanks.
I know under this thing, I'm just using an example. I know there's an exclusion for tanks. The tanks with rubber wheels as opposed to tanks with tracks, okay? Let's get to it. But the point is, how does the public know that? Doesn't that have an impact on the community?
OES maintains a website that has all the equipment that's listed and acquired, and it's also publicly available in other forms. So there is.
So if it's listed, the Kevlar vest, the guys are going to go to the website and check it out and make sure they go get the Kevlar vest next time that they know this deal. How does that solve a problem? I mean, we're always fighting this tension about transparency in government versus operations. I get that. I don't have a problem. But these are pretty dramatic impacts on folks. And if, in fact, the government, and you got elected officials that know about it already, what's the difference of having this kind of disclosure? I mean, I get it, but you guys, I mean, every time we see a pattern of these arguments of opposing by government the status quo of government to change, you know, and I get it. It's okay. That's your job at some level. But our job is to paint a picture, a vision of the future, and the disclosure. What's the, you know, it seems to me if it's already on the website, what's your argument? If it's not in the appropriations process, or if it is, or if it's over there, what's the difference? How does that work?
The concern is that both the process that goes into acquiring the equipment can be relatively speedy in nature. The equipment comes up on a website, you have a limited amount of time to acquire it. So even though the bill says you don't have to have a specific approval for each item of equipment, that
you have a chilling effect for the department to go out with an elected sheriff to be able to actually get the equipment for free. Is that your point?
Yes, Nevada and Arizona will acquire those pieces of equipment as opposed to California being able to use them. I would also argue that these pieces of equipment are not for use against the citizens. They're used to protect law enforcement officers. When an officer rolls on a scene and there's a hostage situation or there's a shootout in a downtown area, those...
I think there's people that, given the recent history, would argue differently, but that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, I guess what it would boil down to is we can acquire this equipment either through the surplus process of 1033, we can acquire it separately, it can go through a board vote or not. What is likely going to happen is there are things that we are still going to need as tools of the trade, battering devices to open a door when serving a search warrant.
Of course.
This bill will have the effect of saying you can buy that from a vendor and expend local resources, or you could get it for free from the federal government, but if you're going to get it from free for the federal government, you have to get the board to approve it, whereas you need no board approval if you just go down and acquire it yourself. So there are some
It's a budget process. It's appropriation budget. You still need an approval by government to spend the money.
Generally speaking, when a budget is authorized for an agency like that, they're not saying you're going to go acquire 5 cars, 4 airplanes, 3 bulletproof vests, and 2 guns. They're saying here's your budget, and here's your acquisition.
Right, and they have budget for personnel, and they've got budget for gasoline or for whatever operations, and they got budget for other things, right? And you have parameters of what you can or can't acquire. That's already set forth.
They can, but if they just say your equipment budget is X, and part of your equipment needs are, I need an entry device, then you're going to go acquire it. That does not require a separate board approval.
Okay.
Thank you.
Lovell.
John Lovell with the California Police Chiefs Association. We are also regretfully in opposition to the bill. A couple of points. The gentleman who testified in support very eloquently went through a number of the acquisitions that have been made. But what I would point out is that since the promulgation of Executive Order 13688, a number of the
What's
items.
13688?
That's the President's executive order that established certain federally provided project items that are no longer available to local law enforcement. Tracked armored vehicles, bayonets, grenade launchers, large caliber weapons and ammunition.
Right, that's the list of them.
Yeah, the second issue we'd point out is that one of the unintended consequences, and Mr. Salzello said this quite well, one of the unintended consequences of putting this through some kind of a pre-approval process is that you're not going to get the product. In the time it's going to take to get the approval, the police chief in Monmouth, New Jersey is going to have the product. And so you're then looking at agencies who could get some of these products for free, that have important public safety dimensions, having to turn around and go purchase them. We commend the author for some of the changes she has made in the bill, because clearly items like cafeteria trays now can be obtained, but we still remain in opposition to the bill and believe that the immediacy of concern is largely mooted by the promulgation of the President's executive order.
Mr. Chairman, members, David Jones on behalf of the City of Burbank, echoing the concerns of others here opposed. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, can I add just one point of information? Speaking to your dialogue with Mr. Salzillo, the federal entity responsible for overseeing this program within the Department of Defense, if you file a Freedom of Information Act request with them, the limit of the disclosure they will make is what county certain items of equipment went to. They will not divulge the specific local agency. So that's the take on disclosure that the feds have. It's very limited.
Questions of the members? Senator Bell?
First of all, I want to move approval of the bill. You know, when I was on the city council, my colleague, Assemblywoman Campos, was also on the San Jose City Council, and we both have a lot of experience on city council, so we kind of know how business is. Simply, the city manager can put an item on the agenda on a weekly basis and put it on the agenda, have a public hearing, and approve it. It's not that complicated to put a public noticed item on the agenda. It's pretty simple. You can have a standing item on the agenda, says purchase of equipment, and it can be listed on a weekly basis. They can put it on the agenda. I don't know, is that the way they do it still?
Yes.
See, it's not a complicated process, and I don't think a few days of noticing the public that the items are going to be acquired by a city government is impeded by this short period of time. It's not. It doesn't seems to me something that is a major impediment. So I would urge
you advance approval. Both. I mean, your city council.
So the bill, if I may, the bill basically says that elected bodies will approve a list of items that law enforcement. So if this gets signed into law, you know, by January 1st, the council can say, these are the items that we're looking for, and then whenever that equipment becomes available, the chief or the sheriff has the ability to purchase it too. And then the last thing, you know, we are all very grateful that the president created an executive order, but that can change when a new president comes in. So if we in California are going to continue to be at the forefront of making sure that there's transparency for our communities, then we need to move forward. So I've enjoyed the dialogue, but it really is a very simple bill, making sure that communities that have been affected by these forms of military equipment, that they have the ability to be able to voice their concern about what their neighborhoods are going to look like.
Right, so if a city council makes a decision, this advance approval, that says battering rams are okay, if they come up, take them as quickly as you can. If you want to take vests or to protect officers, because that's a critically
Take them as quick as you can.
Nobody has an objection to that. But if you're going to buy M16s or some big, other things that fall within that window between what could be problematic for the community and what's outside the exclusion executive order, you come talk to us. I mean, that's really what this boils. That's how I read this bill.
Exactly, and to the point, if the council wants to override the 1,000 community members that say we don't want to see that particular equipment in our city, the council has that prerogative. But it gives the members of the community of a city the ability to voice their concerns.
Anything further from the members? Anything further on the close? We got a motion. Secretary, call the roll.
Hertzberg?
Aye.
Hertzberg, aye. Wynn? Bell?
Aye.
Bell, aye. Hernandez? Hernandez, aye. Laura? Laura, aye. Morlock? Morlock, aye. Pavley?
5-0. We'll hold it open for the members who are absent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the conversation. Appreciate it very much.